Very quick commercial. I don't do commercials, but I'll do a very quick commercial on Dassault Systèmes, just so you know where we come from. French-owned company, one of the first European listed companies, a global company. We are rated as the second most sustainable company globally. We work across 12 industries and more. So if you think of an industry, we're probably working there. When I was asked at Farnborough Air Show a couple of weeks ago, can you tell us which aerospace companies you work with? I said, well, it's probably easier to tell you which ones we don't work with. Over 90% of those at Farnborough are clients of ours. But we do work right across everything from aerospace to defence to oil and gas to marine and offshore to construction to retail to energy to mining. A whole range of diverse industries use the technology we bring to that particular part of the world. So, okay, what I'm not going to do is talk about Dassault Systèmes. What I want to address is look at the future. And oddly enough, when I put this talk together, I'd never met André before. But his challenges I will touch on in the way the industry is looking to the future, how industry is changing. One of the areas I address in Europe is the future of industry. And there's a big drive in Europe to look at how industry is changing. We talk about Industry 4.0, which is the German definition of future industries. The French definition is industry of the future. In the UK, we talk about future industry. But we're all talking about the same thing in that we're talking about digital transformation because we're now entering the fourth industrial revolution, which is the digital age. I say entering, we're not there yet. The industries are just beginning to move into this area, some faster than others, some less so, and sadly construction is on the less so end of the spectrum, and I'll be addressing that this morning. So what is the digital age doing? And I'll just flick my slide on. If I don't change my slides, I haven't forgotten, I don't have very many, I only have one other, and that'll come on at the end. I know some of you like to check slides to see whether the speaker's forgotten to turn them on, but I haven't got that problem because I don't use many. So what is the digital age doing? What it is doing is really creating the drivers which are going to transform industry. Because industry needs to exploit the significant advantages to be derived from the effective and efficient use and management of data. All industries rely on data to be efficient. It's how you manage that data is key to success. So what I will do is demonstrate in the next 30 minutes how these industry-leading technologies develop for other sectors are exponentially improving value and efficiency. And I'll give you one very quick example. One of our clients, Saab in Sweden, we work with them to design and develop the new fighter aircraft for the Saab defense market. And already they're seeing cost reductions of 30% through using integrated data in the way they approach their processes. And so what I believe is that we can actually use this similar process to really propel the construction industry into the digital age, which is, in my view, is the future industry. I'll examine the impact of this not only on the industry, but on the supply chains which support the industry, showing how this will improve supply chain capability and skills, and assess the impact this will have on national economies and the construction potential of the countries involved. I think it is a game changer as far as that potential is concerned. Now, there's a considerable amount of data created during the design, development, construction, and utilization of a built asset. And if properly configured and integrated, this can be harnessed to drive value, to cut costs, and more importantly, to cut waste, because a significant amount of cost in construction is tied up in waste. And if we can take that out of the equation, then we can see a cost benefit immediately. Then the data properly configured, properly integrated, we can use that to create a digital asset, the virtual twin of the asset you are about to build, which when used by the end customer, those who are going to manage the asset when it's all completed, can provide a dynamic platform on which to manage legacy, because there will be legacy, to sustain the present and plan the future. And the right use of data will give you that ability to plan what the future might look like. And I'll touch more on that later when I talk about Singapore City. The effective configuration of data will also drive operations and the ongoing maintenance requirements of any built asset, which will lead to an increase on the return of equity for developers And the more equity return developers get, the more likely they look kindly on the construction industry providing that particular asset for them. And I think it's going to change forever the popular perception of the construction industry as one which is labour intensive, which it still is, one which is wasteful, which it still is, costly, highly risky, both financially and physically, and create a dynamic, effective, high-value industry which will attract investment and become the economic driver I mentioned a moment ago. I've tested this on construction companies across Europe, and so what I'm saying is actually borne out by their views. And obviously I've used my own construction background to provide some of this thinking. Now what do we mean by intelligent construction? All industries are trying to become intelligent. And so what do we mean by that? One way of looking at it is using a balanced, optimized combination of people, and Andre talks about changing the way people are skilled and upskilled and trained, processes, and the most appropriate technology. There's no one technology which fits everything. It's what's appropriate to your business. That's what is key. In order to combine those things, people, process, and technology, and what you'll see is maximum advantage being driven for a company's operating model, how the company works, and their business processes that are able to function. But note the order I've used. People. It's people that are behind this. Then processes, then lastly, technology. Yes, I come from a technology company. We call ourselves a scientific company. As a company, 40% of our profits are put back into R&D. We have a huge R&D base right across the globe, which is driving this technology approach to enable new thinking to occur. Actually, one thing I didn't mention about Dassault Systèmes, and we're owned by the Dassault family. You may have heard of Dassault Aviation. That's one of their companies. But you didn't know they produce wine as well. Being French, of course, you'd expect them to produce wine. I wouldn't recommend it, but it's not bad drinking. So we're really at the thing about people again. They're really at the heart of intelligent construction or intelligent industry, and they're very much a part of the new industrial revolution. They will drive innovation. The youngsters that Andre was talking about with their knowledge of software, they will drive the innovation. They will look for continual improvement. They want to be efficient. They want to be part of that efficiency process. And then the processes they use allow that new thinking to occur, and the technology gives the bedrock to their thinking. But let's just go back in history a few decades, about 40 years. That's when Dassault Systèmes really started to make itself felt on the world markets. We pioneered the use of 3D design software in the aerospace industry, which enabled aircraft engineers to design the aircraft in 3D, create the digital mock-up, and then in time, the virtual twin of the real aircraft. The first virtual twin was the Boeing 777 Dreamliner, which was built digitally from start to finish. The second one was the Airbus A380, a digitally built aircraft. It was flown in the digital world before it even started being riveted together, so the pilots knew it would work. And the virtual twin existed of those aircraft to allow future modification and experimentation to take place in the virtual world without having to affect real aircraft or real people. This work was then taken up by the automotive industry. Jaguar Land Rover, a case in point in UK. Mercedes, Honda, Toyota, Lotus, McLaren, all use the Dassault Systèmes digital approach to design and manufacture. And you can see where this is going, how other industries then started to use that example to improve their own efficiency in production and in manufacture, becoming industrialized in the way they produce their equipment. We took that work and turned that into then products or life cycle management, building life cycle management in the case of the construction industry, and looking at really how the experiences that people want today, the youngsters today want to have experiences of life. They don't just want to be given a product and tell that's it. They want to be part of that development. And how we then shape those experiences by using configured and integrated data on a dynamic platform in the cloud. A platform which this data is placed and integrated to allow this experimentation to occur. It gives you relevant and timely decision-making applications. It creates the environment for research experimentation, all in the virtual world where it's safe. It's safe to work in the virtual world. But again, all this was derived through the ability of people to want to create ideas, to lead innovation, to lead the thinking, and then have the courage to give meaning to that thinking by using this groundbreaking technology virtually. It was intelligent, is very much intelligent, and will form the foundation of future intelligent practices, processes, and systems in our future industries. Now, this intelligent engineering or construction approach, and I use the term engineering for a number of things. Engineering can be anything from engineering a car to engineering a building to engineering a shampoo bottle. Not many of you know that your shampoo bottles from Unilever are designed using Dassault Systèmes technology. It'll adapt to anything, aircraft to shampoo bottles, big spectrum of activity. I'll talk about automated manufacturing because the fourth industrial revolution is about automating manufacturing, becoming more intelligent in the way we produce assets. And manufacturing, in its wider sense, covers a whole range of things from traditional engineering to manufacture consumable items, the shampoo bottle I mentioned, to design and manufacture the next year's aircraft or car model, and the design and construction of buildings and communities, which is very much our focus today. Clearly, there's a lot of debate being generated. This is discussed all the time. You go to any developed country now, and there are conferences on intelligent construction, intelligent engineering, future engineering, digitization. It's caught the imagination because that's where we're going to be. That's the way things are moving in the future. Some are approaching it with very, rigid protocols, a very Germanic approach to life. You need a system, you need a protocol, and that's what we will do. Whereas others are looking at evolution, but founded on a good technology base, but allowing the brain, the mind to think these things through and evolve techniques as new thinking occurs. The work that's ongoing is bringing together a confederation of cutting-edge industries, research groups, and academia. Academia has a huge part to play in this, but more about that later, to reshape how these industries are going to work in the future, and particularly how SMEs are going to be given the opportunity to flourish in this expert and trusted supply chain that I'm envisaging, which, putting their capabilities and their knowledge into the digital approach to manufacture, to construction. I think too often supply chains are sort of just do as they're told. We don't use the value they bring in the way that we should. And the digitization process will allow you to do that. And I also see that supply chains are changing. You no longer have your own fixed supply chain. Supply chains are becoming more versatile. They need to because a lot of the smaller companies have disappeared again in the face of strong competition. And so supply chains need to be able to operate across a number of industries, which they do already, but that needs to grow. And digitization will allow them to do that. The virtual supply chain, servicing 4 or 5 different industries, is here now, and that will grow as we move into the future. But again, people and skills are at the heart of this. And we need to create this industry for people because it's people that are important as we move forward. We need to harness the power of the human mind. And I talk to a lot of 17 and 18-year-olds in schools and universities, and they have a breadth of thinking that we could only dream about. Well, I'm older than most of you, but some of you are a lot younger. You're in that world still. But there's a lot of people coming behind you who've got a greater ability to use their imaginations. They're not afraid to use their imagination. They're not afraid to think the unthinkable. And that is where our industry is going to benefit from in the future. We're looking for transformation of businesses, becoming more efficient, becoming more productive, reducing cost, and for the really clever folk around us, getting to market much faster. It's often the case that an early adopter will be there in the lead, and that is happening more and more. So we're now looking for digital solutions which allow innovative and precise design, the virtual mock-up, the virtual twin. How do you realize the physical from the virtual? How do you then manage the whole life cycle of activity of construction or manufacture? And then how do you manage the ongoing servicing and maintenance? All of which allows you to better meet the expectations of that very key group of people, our end customers, our stakeholders, our shareholders. This is all being shaped and enhanced by intelligent engineering. which is transforming the way we actually live, the way we work and play. I mean, I look at Sydney. I mean, Sydney has transformed dramatically since I worked here in 2005. I mean, the changes are phenomenal and ongoing. I just wonder where planning comes into it, because it does seem to be a bit ad hoc, some of it. I think we got an issue there, and I think that's one of the things we need to address. And we're addressing that by cities wanting to become smarter in the way they think. There's a lot of talk about smart cities. Wherever you go, people want to have a smart city. I mean, Adelaide wants to be a smart city. Melbourne wants to be a smart city. Singapore was a smart city 15 years ago. It's now becoming a sustainable city, which is the way I think the future needs to take us. Cities which are using digitization to enhance the way they're managed, to become developed for people, so they're a place where people want to live, work and play, not just go to work and then escape from at the end of the day. How you manage that, how you configure that, is how you become smart is intelligent, of course it is. But then true intelligence comes from how you then configure, assess and use the data in an integrated and configured form to sustain the past. I mentioned that before, but sustain the past, manage the present and plan for the future. And the one thing the virtual twin gives you is that ability to do the research, to do the planning, to ask those what-if questions. What if we change this? How will that affect the dynamic of the city? Now, that is truly intelligence. By configuring this data, relevant data, accurate data, with that ability to input from real, physical, biological, and chemical data, all in 3 dimensions, allows you to generate that virtual world. The City of Singapore, we're working in partnership with the city now to develop the virtual twin of that city. We're just at the end of the first year. Part of it's completed. We've got 2 years to go. And at the end of that process, where we're incorporating over 700 existing data layers that Singapore already has onto a dynamic platform, which allows them to create that city. And if you Google virtual twin Singapore, you will see some of the modeling that's happening and the way Singapore is starting to use that to shape their new city developments, to anticipate where people want to live, where they want to work, how they want to spend their leisure time. Look at how energy use is optimized. How does the movement of people affect the use of energy? How will that affect the transportation requirements in the city? How does high-rise new development affect wind flows, affect shadow fall onto existing buildings? Because a lot of the value of a property, particularly residential, would depend on how much shadow is created by other buildings around it. And you can look at these models in Singapore now and say, yeah, at certain times of the day with 30% shadow or whatever it may be. And so all that is coming into play, which allows this balance between life, nature, and the product that is being produced, and gives you the opportunity to answer these very difficult if we type questions as we look at the future of the city. It's becoming a place for people, not just lifeless bricks, steel and concrete. And when I look around some of the developments around Europe in particular, and I use the City of London as an example, because that's where I spend a lot of my time, I look at the way some of the high-rise developments have taken place, and all they've done is create canyons, which create, generate wind, generate shadow, actually, overhot. The position of one building against another affect the way that building moves in the atmosphere. And it's so in one case, they had to put extra supports into another building because they didn't think this through before they started doing some of the developments. But this virtual twin approach will allow that development to assess and ask all those questions at the right time. And then it becomes a city for people to really want to use and to enhance their lives. Where do they shop? Where do they get healthcare from? What about transportation timetables? Where's the best educational places to visit? Where are the best leisure activities? It's a whole list of services for people that's allowing cities like Singapore, I think they're the world's first anyway, to really look at their city as a place that people want to live in. And they hosted a World City Summit a couple of weeks ago, which attracted a huge amount of attention from around the globe. To be part of that is exciting, it's dynamic, and it drives a lot of the thinking that's going on at the moment for the construction world in particular. But not every twin needs to be on such a grand scale. I mean, Singapore is a big-scale virtual twin. It can be a lot smaller. The value of the data that's used is not simply the platform which it sits, The platform is there to take whatever data you want to put on it, but it arises from how that data is then used. The twin can be anything you wish it to be with the right integrated data. The car, Jaguar Land Rover produced the virtual twin of next year's Range Rover model. It exists in the virtual world already. It's being refined before they even start building it. It could be the car, it could be the building, it could be the item of clothing you're wearing. Teenagers these days want to look at their clothing online. They want to help design their own next pair of jeans or the next dress or whatever the case may be. And this is allowing them to do that by producing that virtual twin for them to experiment with. And these young people are our future innovators and decision makers. Influence them now and they'll be doing the right things in the future. They're used to experimentation, as I mentioned. But the scale is different to Singapore. It doesn't have to be grand. It can be small. It can be usable in that regard. But I think cities across the globe are now looking at how Singapore is developing, and they want to get smarter with data sources and multiple sensors connecting people, services, and things so they can engage with each other. But the real trick, the intelligent trick, is not to have sensors everywhere producing standalone bits of data. It's how you put all that data together to manage that entity. Sensors are great, but they don't go the whole way. We're looking at how do you bring infrastructure together with social capital, with technology, all to fuel sustainable economic and social development, to provide better lives and better urban environments. But having said all of that, while these cities, there are a number around the world now which are thinking this way, while they're on this upward technology path, I'm afraid in the construction industry, we're not taking the same dynamic trajectory. But we must take that same trajectory if we're to drive value and keep pace with the development of future cities. And there's a lot of talk now about future cities. How does a city want to be in the future? And as the construction industry, we need to be thinking the same way. And cities are not just trying to be smarter, but are using technology to engineer the way they want to be. So it's that future engineering of the city development, and we in the construction world need to be part of that. Cities are having to innovate fast and smart to deal with the major urban challenges of population growth or decline in some areas. A declining population is as bad as a growing one because it leaves behind legacy, which has got value, but how much of it is usable. It's looking at housing, it's looking at healthcare, it's looking at energy, education, transportation, financials. You put the financial data onto this platform with all the other data integrated as well. You begin to see where the real costs start to fall. And I think you can probably begin to imagine how you can manage a construction activity by having the right architectural construction data, financial data. It becomes a business model, not just a construction model. So we need to be there driving in that particular way. History shows that balancing all these needs and the desires of cities and their citizens is very complex and fraught with political and financial minefields. PwC predicts that by the end of this decade, construction will account for more than 13% of the global economy. That sounds a lot, but it could be more. It's one of the largest target industry sectors in the UK. Over £90 billion goes to the UK economy, which is only 6.7%. It needs to be more. It needs to add more value to national economies. In the UK, again, there are over 280,000 businesses covering about 2.93 million jobs, which is around 10% of the total UK employment. So 10% of the people in the UK in employment are involved in construction, but it's only delivering 6.7% to the GDP. There's a demand for efficiency there. Why is it so inefficient? It's outdated, it's dangerous, and there's a great drive for safety, as we know. It's quite low in productivity terms. Steering cities and those involved in developing them in the right direction is a real challenge for planners, and it has been so for decades. Especially true in the UK, which lags behind many countries, and much of Asia for model building practice. I think Asia is a real classic example of how modern building practices are beginning to change the face of the nations involved, the dynamics in the economies. When you think of the way construction is carried out today, And I talked this through with a number of construction managers, managing directors and chief executives in the UK a couple of weeks ago. The construction techniques used to build a 52-storey shard in London, you've all seen photographs of the shard, you've not been there yourselves, were not that different from those employed 400 years ago to build St Paul's Cathedral. St Paul's Cathedral took 30 years, the shard took 2. So some things have improved, but the processes are still remarkably similar when you look at the 2 examples that I quoted, 400 years apart. They remain the same for hundreds of years, there's no doubt about that. Highly skilled labour carries out tasks for which they're often overqualified. So we've got overqualified people on construction sites. Think of how different ways you could use those qualified people, not just on the site. When you start to look at off-site manufacture, and Andre touched on this in his talk, you don't need such highly skilled people to manage off-site. The skills can then be taken and used in the development activity. Off-site work allows you to assemble quality assured parts, whether it's floor plates, pillars, beams, whatever the case may be, or bathrooms, shipped 1,000 kilometers, 1,000 miles across the construction site, knowing that when they get there, they'll fit. They'll be fit for purpose. When you lower a modularized accommodation block onto its bolts, you know the bolts will go through the holes provided. Because you model that in the digital world, you know it works, you know it fits. And we're seeing really significant inroads into architecture, design, and fabrication through the use of 3D technology. But that sort of process modeling, and it is about process modeling, is virtually non-existent during the construction phase. We need to start modeling the construction phase in order to realize some of the real efficiencies we can get out of it. But get it right, and we will. I think together we'll get it right. We will see the whole sort of BIM approach to life taking on literally new dimensions, both at the design stage, during construction, building management, which enable built assets to be managed economically and effectively using real-time sensor data fed onto the platform to breathe life into its virtual twin. Imagine creating the virtual twin of a building before you build it. So you know you're playing with the real thing when it comes around. Using data range for energy consumption, space planning usage, clash avoidance, and so on, fabric wear and tear, how different fabrics react to climate change. All of that is possible in terms of experimentation and assessing what might be and what the future will look like. You can take it even further. You can use the virtual twin to focus on new housing developments, determine the environmental impact of the developments you're carrying out, to look at how the communities are working, how the retail spaces will fit, and importantly, taking the most advantageous logistic decisions when building the development. So your logistic processes take account of local needs and local demands. Sometimes these can be quite excessive. I remember when Lease was building the new shopping arcade in the middle of Cambridge. Cambridge City was very keen to point out, don't disrupt the life of the students. The students must have their own life, continuing unabated. That created huge logistic nightmares. And a lot of money was tied up in building big logistic parks outside Cambridge City to move stuff into during the day, then move it into the city at night. If that could be modelled in the virtual world, we would have saved, I say we in my Lease days, a huge amount of money. The techniques weren't there then, they're here now. And I think this new perspective of integrating data will integrate these formerly disparate departments in all involved in construction to make them better informed, to make them more efficient, to enable visualization and simulation with greater accuracy to deliver better lives for the populations which these assets are being built. Without this vision, without this unified workflow that records actions and decisions, good planning would be compromised due to invisible data, stuff you can't see. There's a lot of invisible data out there you cannot see. If you can identify it and integrate it, then you'll start to remove some of the issues, which of course, some of the real legal issues which arise in many construction projects. This is all locked away in departmental silos. We need to break those silos down to get that data visible. All that closed data become open data that the developers can use, the construction company, and the supply chains can use, because they have a huge part to play in this. Using these experiences to simulate cities and developments reveals the potential problems that may not be seen by any other means. Overlaying data reveals new views, what you're looking at. And it's possible with this technology to actually predict events in transportation systems, in service hubs, in public services, in utility and security. Security is a huge issue for many developed countries today because of the problems in the Middle East, which are now spilling over into countries around the world. But in linking all this together with financial software allows cost planning and budgetary predictability. So the potential problems arising from that can be observed, costed and fixed before they occur. Usually it's afterwards at great additional cost. It allows things to become more visible, to become more understandable. It saves time. It allows projects to move more easily, to sit more easily, to be easily understood by stakeholders, so they can understand the issues involved, and so they can see the consequences of the decisions that they may make on a construction activity. To be able to see this big and small picture simultaneously with all the detailed finances around it can help reduce corruption by making it easier to spot. And I know of no country on the globe who has not suffered from some corrupt activity in the construction field. But if you can spot this first, you can actually start to reduce that liability. We've seen over the last 10, 20 years or so that many industries are now improving their efficiency and their productivity and their profits as a result, and their return to the society in which they belong. We're way behind that in the construction industry. The Department for Business Innovation and Skills in the UK has made this official in their economic analysis of UK construction, which states, and I quote, "The proportion of firms innovating still ranks low relative to other sectors." It's up to us to change that, to raise that ranking, to become more innovative in the way we deal with our construction projects and the assets we're producing. Studies of the industry have shown that there is documented 25% to 50% waste in coordinating labour and in managing, moving, and installing materials. I visited an automated factory in the UK now, which Laing O'Rourke is running, to do a lot of their pre-fabrication work. And they very effectively showed me that their waste actually was just a pile of rubble in a corner. I've seen waste on building sites, which is more than a pile of rubble. It's a mountain of rubble. It's a mountain of materials, which is not being used because it was over-provided for. That's waste, and that's cost, and that's where the value starts to be taken out of the business. Get rid of that, and value grows. And I think in many cases, we're not using the talents right, we're not using our skills properly, avoidable accidents happen, and productivity remains low. I think the introduction of public-private partnerships and private finance initiatives have changed the way developments around the world are built and managed. The involvement of more parties in larger-scale projects and within tighter regulatory and legal frameworks requires transparency, the transparency that data integration will give you. It requires openness, and it requires collaboration. It will enhance that process. And sometimes, still today, these are very rare commodities in parts of the construction industry. I see some are really good at it. I see many who aren't, who still haven't advanced from the original days of construction process. And I think this gives you a significant business opportunity for the industry to really excel itself by you getting the supply chains involved, getting the collaboration going with supply chains. And you apply that to building, you can produce stunning results, as we're seeing in other sectors. Truly stunning results. You imagine a construction supply chain sharing its data with a developer, with the major developer, the major construction company. It can have a huge impact on the delivery of projects at time and cost, adding major value to the overall process. Many building projects overrun. They outspend their budgets by more than 20%. You can probably add larger figures than that, but that's an average, a global average, outspend by more than 20%. And in the end, result in expensive and wasteful litigation. A number of companies always set a bit of money aside, knowing there'll be some litigation at the end of the process. We need to get away from that particular aspect of life. Between the concepts of a building and the delivery of the asset, through all the stages of design, engineering, contracts, bidding, awards, fabrication, construction, all have their risk. And we need to take that risk out of the business by managing the data around all that in a better way. Stakeholders in building activities, their risk is more than financial. Unless they get it right, it will define how locations and neighbourhoods will look and feel. And people have emotional attachments to locations, to environments, and we need to get that right by managing the activity that provides that data. We can reduce this risk by getting clients, architects, contractors, communities and stakeholders working interdependently, defining what it is they want the future to look like. On a current unified knowledge platform where guesswork and misinterpretation are removed, and yet give open, secure, collaborative integration, which allows you to drive the value we are looking for. I think the building industry is fragmented, with the world's biggest construction companies occupying only a small percentage of the total market, 6.9% in the UK. It's far too small, in my view. Small firms make up the majority of the industry, often without the benefits of technology. And again, Andre highlighted this in his talk. The smaller firms don't use this technology yet. Imagine what could happen if they did, if they're using the same technology as the major developers. That would really drive efficiency. That's really game-changing stuff. The platform gives you this diverse ability to address those many needs. It'll help construction-focused companies to better understand the environment, the short and long-term business opportunities, the technical and commercial implications of the projects they're undertaking. It'll support waste elimination and make projects leaner and create safer construction project environments. The approach takes BIM beyond the current, I believe, very limited design-based BIM level 2 to the ideal level 3 and 4 spectrum of a full building life cycle management activity. The same as other sectors are moving. They don't just look at a product, they look at the whole life cycle of that product. And it generates efficiency, it takes out cost, it takes out waste, and gives you a real positive return on equity. But importantly, it actually allows the complete supply chain to be involved in planning, decision-making, improving capability and skills, and making SMEs agile and competitive in today's competitive world. SMEs that are not agile go to the wall, and we see it all too often. Otherwise, very capable organizations, very small, but they're just losing ground all the time to some of the bigger players. And that's wrong. We need to make, because those smaller companies need to be part of this process in the future. And I have got this view that where supply chain members are part of the overall integrated approach, they get some really good business benefits evolving, which allows them to compete better on the world stage. They could be the innovators. They could be the technology drivers that we need. Introducing this technology attracts young thinkers to the business. The talent that's required. So many graduate programs fail because we do not use the talents they bring, and they become depressed by the environment they find themselves in. But we need this intellectual boost that they can bring to us. Some are changing. Some parts of the construction business is changing, bringing small, bright, enterprising people, then using them properly to undertake new approaches, unshackled by tradition. None of this, we've always done it this way. The question should be, well, why don't we? Why don't we change? Why not do it this way? And I think we'll then start to see the changes happening in the way that they should. I touched on litigation. I mentioned legal aspects earlier. Litigation, either during or after a construction project, is usually based as a result of poor communications. Get the communication right, get the data right, then we'll start to make these really avoidable because people understand what's going on. Just simply unifying a change order system, for example, on a project allows people to work collaboratively. That's the start. It starts to get them thinking in a new way. They've got access to the current state of the building and its information, better informed strategic and tactical decision-making at all stages, which virtually eliminates errors which are caused by wrong or superseded instructions being acted upon. How many times have you gone onto a construction site and seen different sets of instructions being used by different parts of the siloed arrangements that we see in place? That causes problems. That causes litigation in the future. Too often, I think we see that regulatory compliance is an obstacle to progress, but it needs to become a valuable asset if we handle it properly by understanding what makes up that compliance regime. And I think a well-developed delivery system allows you to integrate and accommodate regulations so that they're tracked over time and complied with in the long term without surprising us too late in the day. We can answer the environmental questions by looking at unified building data, determine the status of buildings before they're built, look at the environmental impact, Does it meet stakeholder needs? Are you satisfying the political requirements of the countries in which we're working? Because political requirements can change the face of the things that we do. I think embracing transformational change, harnessing data, and then coupling that with bright, innovative thinkers will drive the efficiency we're seeking. It will create the cost effectiveness and will cause a reduction in the waste that's produced. And I think it would give the construction sector the ability to play its part, and I believe, as I said earlier, it's got a bigger part to play in the complex world of the future, the world we're discussing today, Industry 4.0, in whatever you want to call it, the fourth industrial revolution. All are terms which try to capture the major transformation which is taking place around us. And if we don't see it taking place, then frankly, we're not looking. We need to look, we need to be part of it, we need to actually embrace it and get on with it. And I have this view that accurate and relevant data is key to this future sustainability and certainty. Right, I've almost finished. I've tried to make up some time, but almost there. We're looking to drive operations in a different way, improve ongoing services and maintenance, improve return on equity, give the ability to compete more effectively in an extremely demanding industrial and economic climate, leading in turn to national economic growth, which can withstand global economic shocks. We've all suffered from economic shock over the past 4 or 5 years. We need to make sure we can withstand those, and the better companies are. As well as expanding job opportunities for the bright young. I find youngsters are turned off construction because of this traditional image it's got. It needs to attract the bright youngsters because they're the ones who will change the way we're working. They're the ones who will see increased economic activity and construction playing its real part in GDP growth. Not the 6.7% I mentioned, but the 13%, the 15%. That's where we need to be. All this data on a dynamic business platform gives the politician, the business leader, and the developer, those people who are forging these global and national economies, a window into their world, a window into what might be, as they struggle to manage the legacy of the past, develop the reality of the present, and shape the future. And shaping the future is where I'll leave it, because that is what we should be part of. Thanks very much.